Hello, my name is Nelson, and this tutorial is going to show you how to add a hard-to-kill sprite to the Android game that we are developing. When I mean hard to kill, it's going to be a sprite that's going to have more than one life, and it'll have more than one sound effects to it, so that way you know it's registering your click, but you'll have to kill it at least 4 times before it finally disappears from the screen. It dies. This is a 4-part tutorial. There's 4 videos, and this is the first one. And this first part is really going to show you what happens to the database, the sprite array list, when you delete a element, a sprite from the list. And it's important that you understand that so that way you can visualize what's happening, so you can understand when you're coding why you or I had to make the code look the way it does. Because it deletes things a certain way from the database. You'll have to write your code based on how the remaining elements are assigned their reference number. So, saying that, let's get straight to it. Oh, and by the way, I got this idea for someone. He emailed me. I'm sorry. It was several months ago. I can't remember his name. I destroyed the email, but he gave me an idea. He wanted 2 things. He wanted what he called a static sprite and a power up button. You know, just on my own, just thinking casually about this situation, I quickly realized I know how to make what he called a static sprite, the hard to kill sprite. So that's what this tutorial is going to do, to show you how to make a hard to kill sprite. As far as the power button up, that's probably going to be later on when I decide to make a power up button. But let's get started. We don't have much time, so I'm going to be going kind of quickly. I'm going to launch my Eclipse. This is the Luna version now. I just updated. So if you see, again, a few lines that are not familiar to your version of, or my last tutorials, don't worry about it. It's because I updated my last version of Eclipse to the new Luna version. First thing we're going to do, we're going to go to the left-hand side to the Project Explorer, open up the project, which is called Kill Them All. That's training. Here it is. We're going to open up the src folder, and we're going to open up the package that's in there. And we see all our files. The file we're going to double-click and open is called gameview.java. This is the only file we're going to modify in this 3-part tutorial. So I just wanted to bring you here to show you some lines of code that I'm going to be referring to in this tutorial so you understand where I got them from. The first line is line 33. This is a counting variable that I created. It will help me keep track of how many male sprites are in the sprite array list, so I know which sprite you killed, and therefore I know which sound effects to play. And I only kept track of one group of sprite, and it was the male sprites. Because if it's not a male sprite, then it's a female, and I know that you play only one other sound effect with them, and that's a female sound effect. Next thing I want you to do is go down here to line 82 to 96. This is where the old code had us actually load the sprites we made into the sprite array list. And as you can see, it's listed here saying, okay, go ahead and load the bad or male sprites first, and then load the female sprites second. The last thing I want to show you is way at the bottom. And this last method is the meat and potato, which is actually register your touch to the screen, stores the sprite you touch reference number to I, and then it removes it right here on line 140. I added the code right here, as you well know, and it basically just determines, you know, if I is less than M sprite, I know those are male. And the first thing to do is I reduce M sprite to 1. Before you delete it, I play the appropriate male sound effects, and then it comes down here and deletes the sprite. And therefore, this variable is equal to how many male sprites we have in the sprite array list. Alright, I just want to show you that. Let's bring that down, and let's bring up our mockup. I did it in Photoshop. And this is what happened. Here in line 82 to 96, like I said, the sprite array is loaded into our sprite array list. And down here at the bottom, this is the representation of what happens, how the sprite array looks in memory. Since the male sprites are loaded first, all the male sprites go from 0 to 5. And then the females are from 6 to 11. Any database starts with number 0 because in the computer 0 means something. And if you look right here, this is where I made this M sprite counting variable to keep track of how many male sprites. And basically what I said in the code, I said anything less than 6 is a male sprite. And here's 6, so anything less than 6 is a male sprite. So that number doesn't represent how many male sprites I have. It really represents the reference number. And I use that as to say, if anything's less than 6, it's a male sprite. So play the male sprite sound effects. And that's why I made it 6. You know, I'm going to keep the sprite, but I'm going to change this number to 5 because now I have to keep track of just more than one. Matter of fact, I'm going to keep track of males and the females. I can get away with that, but I'm also going to keep track of that hard to kill sprite, that one sprite. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the website. We're going to create that sprite like we did before. We create all these other sprites. We're going to load it in this line of code up here in the top. So that way that sprite is found and loaded in our sprite array list down here. And so we're going to do this. I didn't show you, but of course I'm going to make the sprite in that website that F4Java showed us. We're going to put it in its appropriate folder. And then I'm going to add this line of code. And what's going to happen to the sprite array list, because I just did that, we know this is what's going to happen. In the sprite array list down at the bottom, the red menace, and I'm going to call the sprite the red menace, and I'm going to make it as red as possible. And it's going to be added at the bottom. Since it's at the bottom of this list, it's going to be added last into our sprite array list, and it's going to be in the 12th spot. So like I said before, I only kept track of the males, as you can see here, but this time I'm going to keep track of the male and the female, but also the red menace. I can get away without not keeping track of the red menace if I don't want to, but I figure if I'm going to keep track of two, I might as well keep track of all three. So what I'm going to do is this. As you can see, I've gotten rid of, I didn't get rid of that M sprite, I just reduced it by 1. And what I'm basically saying is M sprite, the highest number in the reference numbers of the sprite list is 5. The female, I'm going to create a whole new sprite called F sprite, and I'm going to give it the highest reference number of 11. And the red menace, I'm going to give it a name, probably red M sprite, and I'm going to make that equal 12. I might change these names, but basically this is what I'm going to do. This way I know that anything less than 5 is males, equal to and less than 11 is female until you get to 5, and that we know that's where the male starts. And we know that the red menace is equal to only one thing, and that's 12. And that's how the sprite array is going to look in memory. Now, you have to understand what happens to the sprite array list when you delete something. Something uniquely happens, and it happens to all databases, but you have to know about it in a sprite array list, because you're going to have to understand what's happening to the sprites and the elements, so you understand where to find everything. If you can do that visually, then you would understand how to write the code. And when I write the code, you're going to say, well, that's a hard way of doing it. But when I explain this is why, you'll know, because of the way the sprite array list is reacting. So say you're playing a game and you added the red menace to your game and it's running fine, and you say, okay, I'm going to play the game, and it just started, so the sprite array list just looks just like this from 0 to 12. And you say, I'm going to kill, the first thing I'm going to kill is a female sprite. What happens to the sprite array list when you do that? Well, say you kill this one. You don't know which number it is. It's just a female sprite on the screen. You press 1 in a sprite array list. It just happens to be the element of 8. So that one gets deleted, as you can see in our sprite array. It did get deleted. So what happens now? Well, this is what happened automatically. You have no control over it. Anything less than that reference number 8 stays exactly the same. But anything greater than 8, what happens so that the sprite array list gets smaller and is more efficient inside the memory, and it shrinks as you start to delete some, is this. Anything higher than 8 gets pushed down 1. This is exactly what happens automatically. So 8 gets reused again, as you can see. So now there's another sprite running around that has the number 8 to it, assigned to it. But notice how now this statement is, this little variable is wrong. The female sprite is no longer up to 11, it's to 10, and this red menace is no longer 12. The male sprites, they stay exactly the same because they didn't have to be moved. So in memory, where we're going to have these sprites in a big if statement, and those if statements are going to say, if it's a male, reduce these variables to 1 and play the male sound effects. Well, this one was a female, so what happens? In that if statement, it's going to say, else if it's a female, what you need to do is this. The first thing you're going to do is reduce this memory variable to 1. So now the highest number is equivalent to 10, which is true. And then you're going to have to, in that same female, reduce the M sprite variable down to 1, the tracking number to 1, so it reflects exactly where the red menace is in the sprite array list. And that's what happens. You have to understand that's what happens whenever you delete something. Anything higher of it gets pushed down 1. And now you're playing the game, everything's fine, and then what happens if you decide this time to kill a male sprite? Well, let's look at the sprite array list. You press a male sprite, and it happens to be this one. And you killed, you don't know what number it is, obviously, you just know it's a male sprite, and you killed, they had the number 2 reference number in the sprite array list. Well, we already know that anything less than that, 0, 1, stays exactly the same, okay. But anything higher than 2, 3 gets all pushed down 1. So if that's the case, what happens, everything down here gets slide down 1. And look what happens. Whenever you kill a male, in that if statement, and as you saw the code before, it was the first one. It'll say if it's a male, what happens is, first thing in the code, we reduce this down to 1. So we're going to reduce this down to 1 and make it a 4. And now we're saying the male sprite highest reference number is 4, and it is. But now look at what happened to females. Their reference number got reduced down to 1 too. So in that same if statement, you're going to have to reduce this also down 1 to 9. And the red menace is going to have to be reduced down to 10. And as you can see, now they reflect each other. So every if statement, when you start to decide if it's a male or female or the red sprite, you're going to have one or more of these variables in that if statement getting reduced because everything gets shifted down one. This is how the sprite array works in memory. Now, again, the reason why I wanted to show you this is because when I start writing the code, I'm going to have to take into account some weird stuff because of the way the sprite array is reacted when I delete a sprite from the file. And so this helps you understand what occurs in a sprite array list. Now, of course, reference number 11 and 12 is deleted. You can never reference it because it no longer exists. And what happens to all the rest of them that get shift down, their reference numbers get shuffled again. And again, number 2 got reused when we deleted number 2, and I believe first time was number 8, and it got reused. So these reference numbers get reused, and then the ending numbers or the reference numbers have to get diminished depending which one did you kill. If you kill the male sprite, all 3 reference numbers have to be diminished to 1. If you just kill the female number, only the female and the red menace number have to be diminished by 1. And if you happen to kill the first one you kill is the red menace, you killed it 4 times and it gets destroyed, then nothing has to move because the red menace is number 12 and it just disappears. And that's it. This is what I wanted to show you, how the sprite array list works in memory and how all the reference numbers, all the sprites get reshuffled and get new reference numbers. And that's it for this tutorial. Again, this tutorial is going to show you how to make a hard to kill sprite, the red menace, and it's going to have 4 lives and several different sound effects. And this is the first part, and this part shows you just how the sprite array list works. And part 2 and 3 is going to show you how to actually do the coding. So thank you for listening to part 1, and I'll see you in part 2. Goodbye.